Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, and today we have with us another special guest. She goes by the name of Melanie Perry. Now, Melanie is a bit unique because she specializes in the operating room. She's everything operating room, but her background is nursing. And she was actually an OR nurse with experience as a circular, scrub, change nurse, team lead, and manager. And she's had an extensive career, 20 years as a neonatal ICU nurse, OBGYN, med-surg, pain management, and then operating nurse. The operating room came to her in 2011. And then since then, she's catapulted into somewhat of a businesswoman. And she started a blog called The Circulating Life in 2018. And it was a space for everyone that is in the operating room, a community where they can all come and discuss what's going on and really talk about everything that has to do with the operating room. This led her to be actually a host on the First Case podcast. And she really helped develop that brand in January of 2021. She's a content creator for social media, and she's their social media manager. And like I said, she is a host on the First Case podcast, which has become quite the business for her. And it also deals with everything operating room. So this is a treat because she's a unique individual that's done a lot of unique things, and she's truly enterprised herself. And we're going to talk a lot about the operating room, her background, and her perspective as a nurse. So for all you medical sales reps out there, this is something you can really take away from. And for all of you that want to get into the industry, you absolutely want to hear this episode. So as always, we do our best to bring you guests that are innovative, doing things, dynamic things, changing the space within medical sales. And as always, thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. And I really do hope you enjoy this interview. Hi, Melanie. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on the show. So, Melanie, please tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, I am Melanie Perry. I'm an OR nurse. I've been a nurse for 20 years. I've been in the OR for 11, and the operating room is definitely, of all the fields of nursing, areas of nursing that I've worked in, the OR was by far my favorite. Within the OR, I worked primarily in orthopedics, and orthopedics is, I love it. It is, people love it or hate it. I am one of those people who loves it. And through my work in the operating room and through some work that I did, we'll talk about later about work on a blog and the social media page, I got connected to the people at Beyond Clean. And that Beyond Clean is a company that's dedicated to sterile processing education, and they needed somebody with some OR insight. So they brought me on to help with that. And then they also wanted to launch a brand for the OR. So they brought me on for the First Case brand. So I am the co-host of the First Case podcast. I'm the perioperative clinical manager at Beyond Clean and for First Case, and kind of feel like if I could be a circulator, not in the OR, I would be the circulator for the First Case brand because I kind of do it all. But that is kind of what I do. A little quick intro about me.
I love it. Okay, so I'm gonna bring it way down to the basics. Let's start with ortho. You know, okay. A lot of people think when they think ortho, they think bones, they think trauma, they think ER actually. But you actually said OR, ortho. Go ahead and define that for us.
Okay, so orthopedics in the operating room is kind of a little bit of what you said. Certainly there is trauma. People have accidents, they break things all the time and they have to get fixed. So yes, trauma in the OR is a very real thing. There's also total joint replacements. If you have a joint and you need it replaced, we can do it from your finger to your hip. I mean, there is pretty much a joint replacement option for any joint in your body. We can also do fractures that maybe aren't trauma. They don't need to be done immediately, but something that needs to be fixed, or even something in your foot like a bunion. All of those things fall into ortho. Also your spine. There's ortho spine. So we can do anything. If it's related to the bones in your body, we can operate on it and we can make it better.
Yeah,
we can make it. I mean, there are even surgeries where they can do limb lengthening to make you taller. So, I mean, all of these things really fascinating that can be done in the operating room. Certainly, the fractures, the trauma, the broken bones, but also joint replacements, or even you hear people saying they put a camera in their joint and they looked around. Well, a knee scope or a shoulder scope, an arthroscopy. Sure. Those things are we can get in and very minimally invasive, but we can get things fixed. And so that's a lot of what I did.
Now, I just heard something really interesting. What procedure makes you taller?
It's a limb lengthening surgery. Did you ever see the movie? I believe the movie was Gattaca, where the guy had his legs lengthened.
Yes.
That surgery, you really can have it done. I've never seen it personally, but I have read about it. And they go in and they slowly slowly lengthen the tibia and make it longer until and it could be because maybe one limb's not as long as the other, maybe. There are extreme measures people have gone to be taller. So, I mean, there's different options for that, but it's one of those cool ones. Kind of like another cool one is rotation plasty. Another one I've never seen, but I have read about. It's some things particularly they do in kids when a child has to have a below the knee or above the knee amputation, and they actually take the ankle or the foot and the ankle and they attach it up to the top at the femur, so the child still has a joint that moves, but the foot's pointing backwards. But it helps it go into their prosthetic, so their knee will actually though that ankle joint will work like a knee and they can function better. So highly recommend looking at rotation plasty. It's a very fun surgery. Well, I don't think it's fun for the patient, but to me as a nurse, I find it very fascinating.
Absolutely. Okay, now that's not where it ends with you, though. Right now, with First Case and Beyond Clean, you guys have a very specific function within ortho, and that's sterile processing.
Correct.
Again, some of our listeners, they've heard of it, but they don't understand what that is. Break that down for us. What specifically is sterile processing?
Sterile processing is the department within the hospital that is making sure that every instrument we use on every single patient is clean, it is sterile, it is free from contamination, free from any harm that could be caused to a patient. And they are inspecting, they are ensuring that all of these instruments that we use, whether we're talking about using it in the OR or we're using it in labor and delivery or we're using it in wound care clinic or anywhere where you might need an instrument that is clean or sterile, they are the ones making sure that instrument is exactly like it needs to be. They are the instrument experts, and without them, we couldn't do surgery because we cannot do surgery without a sterile instrument. And so everything that we do anywhere where we're dealing with clean or with sterile instruments, it all hinges on the expertise of the folks in sterile processing, and they really keep everything going in the hospital to make sure that we have what we need.
So from the solutions to the actual equipment, the sterile processing companies or vendors are the ones that are making sure all the equipment's clean that are used within surgery.
Yeah, so our sterile processing employees in the hospital, they're the ones cleaning it, they're the ones doing it. And then our vendors and the sterile processing companies out there that are creating these products that make maybe work better for employees, or they make cleaning easier, or all these other things. Sure. These companies are constantly creating new technologies, bringing in new products that can make it easier, make it better, make it safer, and also ensuring that they're also educating along the way so that staff know how to take care of these instruments, how to inspect them, how to make sure that they're putting out a quality product, because at the end of the day, it could be your mom, my mom, your child on the operating room table, and nobody wants a dirty instrument and nobody wants an infection.
Absolutely. And Beyond Clean. So now let's go back to what you do with Beyond Clean. How do they fit into this, now that you've broken it down, explained it, where does Beyond Clean come into play?
So Beyond Clean is this new disrupting type idea of a company created out of a bright idea between two people named Hank Balch and Justin Poulin. And what they did originally, they started as a podcast, and it was for sterile processing. There was no sterile processing podcast 5 years ago. And they started educating, bringing this very important department. We would be nowhere we would be dead in the water without sterile processing in the operating room. We have to have them. We need this department, but they get overlooked. They don't get the budget dollars and information and things that they deserve. And I don't think it's recognized really the value sometimes that they provide. And so Beyond Clean, this podcast is how it started, was there to pour that education into the sterile processing departments, to bring awareness to this department that sometimes is overlooked down in the basement, and to really validate and empower these technicians to know their stuff, to recognize that they know their stuff, and to help them constantly improve. And so Beyond Clean started as a podcast, but that's not where it stopped. What they started doing, Beyond Clean reached out to these vendors, to these companies that are selling into the sterile processing department, and said, hey, we have a voice. We have this podcast. We have people listening to us. We can help you get your message in front of the people who want to buy your stuff. And so they can partner with these vendor companies, and they can take the vendor companies, say, let's use an example. Let's say One Tray IST. They've got subject matter experts about the One Tray. We could interview them about their One Tray, find out about it, really bring it down to kind of like this podcast today. It's just a conversation. We're just talking, but people like to listen to a conversation. They don't like to be talked at, they don't like to just sit in a meeting and go, oh, I'm going to die, And so to change the dynamic, to change the platform and put education into a podcast, even, it's coming from a vendor, but these vendor companies, they're the ones building the products. They're the ones creating it. They know everything about it, and they know why it's designed to do what it does. So giving them that voice, that platform from Beyond Clean, lets them really get it out in front of the masses. And so we can really give them an extra voice, I guess, to really share that education and share their information.
Amazing. And so that's what Beyond Clean does. What does First Case do?
So Beyond Clean was our proof of concept. They launched 5 years ago, and through the success that they had, and as they did the podcast, they worked with vendors through vendor spotlights or through expert series or through conferences where vendors could really put out the education and pour education into sterile processing and provide free CEs along the way, because everybody's always interested.
Everybody wants the CEs.
Exactly. Beyond Clean heard time and time again, this is great for sterile processing. What do you have for the operating room? And Hank and Justin were like, well, we don't, but we think we should. And so they reached out to me through a Facebook group that I was already running on my own. And they said, hey, the operating room, you speak the language, you understand. We want to take what we've done with Beyond Clean and move it to also into the operating room, and we'd like you to join us. And I'd never listened to a podcast ever when they reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in hosting a podcast. I'm like, okay, sounds fun. And I guess you could say the rest is history, because our first podcast launched in January of 2021, and we are still going strong. We actually just, recorded a podcast last night interviewing somebody, a good friend of mine, but it's been interesting and fun to watch First Case grow in the almost following in the footsteps of Beyond Clean, and being able to offer industry partners and vendor partners this option of putting out education, of improving our space, and also letting people know what it is that our vendor partners have to offer, because sometimes they just don't know, or sometimes you don't get the message in front of the right person. But when somebody can say, hey, here's this podcast, they interviewed me about our new washer disinfector, or they interviewed me about this new enzymatic cleaner that you can use at point of use, or they interviewed me about whatever, people can go and listen to a podcast, and then they can find out about it. And it's very passive learning. You can just do it when you want to. You're much more interested if you're choosing to listen to it. And it gets the message out.
So Beyond Clean and First Case Media, they partner with vendors that improve the space of sterile processing, and I guess also improve just operating room practices in general.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. That is fascinating. So let's go back to you then. So you're an OR nurse, 11 years, which is a significant amount of time. You are an expert. Take us back to when you were, hold on. Are you still practicing as an OR nurse today?
No, I am strictly in education. I'm non-clinical at this point. All education, all social media with First Case. I'm pouring all of my efforts into growing this brand and providing my expertise to help improve the education we can offer.
So being an OR lover, how much do you miss it?
Oh my gosh, so bad.
Really?
I will say that's a little bit of caveat there because I do miss it. I miss the environment. I miss the people. I miss the energy. But I don't miss the long nights, the on-call, and the exhaustion that all of us deal with day in and day out from just the grind of the hours and the labor and the work. So I can definitely say that I am at a point in my life where I'm proud that I did it. I'm glad that I did it. And I would go back and work per diem probably if I could make it happen. Where I live right now, I don't have that option. So one day it's on the list, I promise. But for now, I'm enjoying the rest, although I don't know how rested I am. I'm just not on my feet all the time. So
when did you leave the operating room?
I left the operating room in July, well, the last day of June in 2021. So I've been out for a little over a year.
So I talked to a lot of nurses, and a lot of nurses, they want to transition into medical sales. And we're going to talk about that. But before we do, did COVID kind of make you want to leave the operating room faster, or were you already on your way out?
I was already burnout before COVID ever hit. And I don't think I processed the level of burnout I was dealing with until I actually did leave. But COVID, for me, my experience with COVID with the hospital that I worked at, the hospital did a fantastic job taking care of their employees, of paying us even when we could not go to work. And because my primary hospital was the hospital that I worked in primarily did outpatient surgery, we had a couple of months where we weren't at work, but our hospital paid us, which I have to say everybody didn't have that option, and I'm very grateful that we did. But that rest was actually good for me because I was already dealing with burnout. And so I know COVID and the scary and all of that, but it's like, oh, I can take a minute to rest. But then we came back with a vengeance, and cases came back. The workload was the volumes. We were bursting at the seams with all the workload, all the volume, and it was a lot. I actually, during all that time, also ended up having to have surgery and having other things done, and it's like, and it was one of these minor elective things, but it was because it was my feet. I had plantar fasciitis, and it was so bad I could not do anything anymore, and my body, I think, was falling apart from the constant strain of the work I'd put it through for 20 years. I mean, I'm old, I guess, but it was just almost one of those, you know what, maybe it's time to take what I know and take what I'm good at and pour it into the OR from a different direction so that I can still be a part of this area that I really love, but I can maybe improve it or make it better, and maybe not have my, body fall apart in the process.
I love that. You really came from a good position. I mean, that's some true insight that you got to give yourself before you made the transition into what you do today. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I want to know what your experience was like dealing with medical sales reps, specifically medical device OR-based medical sales reps, when you were an OR nurse, especially now that so many nurses, we work with a lot of nurses making that transition. We help them make that transition. So right off the bat, what would you say, if you could define your experience with medical sales reps in a couple sentences, what would you say? Think back to when you were an OR nurse.
I have a wonderful, wonderful relationship with so many of the reps that I dealt with. I loved them. They saved my tail on more than one occasion. They were the experts. They knew the trays, they knew the equipment, they knew the stuff. And then I even had a couple more who didn't just know what was in their trays, they knew what was in other people's trays too, not because they were trying to do somebody else's job, but they just knew. Sure. And I mean, there was one particular one, her name was Christine. I still text her. I love her,
Oh,
but she
that's
knew
wonderful.
everything. And I could text her and be like, Christine, I need this. I don't know where to find it. Can you? And she could tell me. And then the shining stars, I guess, of the bunch who found that happy medium between always being prepared, always being available, not to the extent of like, too far, but they were there, or they had somebody who could be there. They knew their stuff, but they weren't pushy either. That nice, happy medium. And I think my experience boiled down to I had some really good relationships, really good sales reps, and they made all the difference in our cases when they were prepared and they knew what was going on. They knew their stuff. You can't. There is no comparison. I love them. They were great.
That is fantastic. So, I mean, that leads me to my next question, and you kind of answered it already. What really makes a good medical sales rep? Besides knowing your stuff and,
Mhm.
and really doing your best to be an ultimate resource, what are some tangible things you would say that if someone listening to this podcast right now wants to become a medical device sales rep in the OR, they need to really keep these things in mind?
One of the big ones that comes to mind, and some of these maybe are negative because these are some of my frustrations, but if you
Speak
don't do
freely.
this, it
Please
will
speak freely.
make your life better. The circulator and the tech in the circulator and scrub tech or scrub nurse in the room are your best friends, or they can make life really miserable for you. And having a good relationship, not just with the surgeon, because I realize the surgeon is the one you're trying to have a relationship with, and you're trying to get, them to use your screws or your plates or your implants or whatever it is you want them to use. But at the end of the day, you're working with that circulator and that scrub to get that room open, to get it set up. Have your trays ready, have them there on time. Don't make them have to chase you down on a regular basis, because you don't want to be known as that rep, because everybody's got that rep and you don't want that one. You don't want to be that one.
Right.
And so if it means getting to the hospital 30 minutes early to make sure that your trays have made it through sterile processing, or make sure your trays are on the case cart. Don't depend on the circulator who's got 85,000 different things to do to also, well, she can just go get my tray, or he can just go get this. No, a lot of times, depending on the setup of the facility, the rep is expected to make sure those trays are on the case cart, make sure the trays are there, or make sure they are, ready so sterile processing can put them on the case cart. But make sure that your trays are ready. Make sure they're there in a proper amount of time so that sterile processing can get them ready. Dropping them off at 5 a.m. for a 7 o'clock case, your trays aren't going to be
No.
ready.
No go.
And
Right.
your room's going to be mad and your case is going to be delayed. Now, I understand it can't always be helped. Sometimes there's one tray in the state and it had to come from 6 hours away the night before. And
Right.
that's when, as an ortho team leader, my job was to reschedule the case to make sure we could do it. I realize there are extenuating circumstances, but that was always a big one. Having the reps not only having their trays there, but also if they needed to be there for the case, knowing they were there and not trying to call them ahead of time and find, where are you? We need you here. That was always frustrating. And then the other, especially in orthopedics, also you have this in neuro and even in cardiac. I'm sure, although I'm not experienced with cardiac, but I can only imagine you would have it there too. You might have a long list of implants. We might have just put in 20 screws, 2 plates, or we might have just put in 5 different implants for a total knee. And the circulator, the way charting most places is today, we have to document every one of those implants. You have your little paper that you're putting all the stickers on or whatever, especially when it comes to screws and plates and things. You've got it all filled out. But if you don't give the circulator that page until we're rolling out of the room, then I can't do any of the rest of the charting I need to do until I get that patient to PACU, and then I get back, and now my turnover is delayed because I've got to sit here and chart all of this now. I don't want to be handed a page of implants at the very end of the case when
Right.
maybe we could work together and you could keep me in the loop. Okay, here's the number for this one, or every 3 or 4 or whatever. Here's these. So being able to chart at a time when it's actually convenient for the circulator, because at the end of the case, when we're getting that patient off the table and getting them on the stretcher and getting them out of the room, that is not convenient for me to chart. And I don't want to be handed a
Right.
sheet of paper at that time of the case. And that was just another big frustration that we had. But I think,
No.
yeah, it's what makes, I guess maybe you could really pay attention, see the flow of the room. How can you be the most help? I know different hospitals have different rules on what you can touch and what you can't, and what you can open and what I know there's a lot of rules. But when you can be helpful, when you can offer advice, or when you can maybe have your implant sheet and hand it to them at a time that's convenient for them to chart, it just goes a long way of being considerate that there's a lot of work going on around you, and that everybody wants to get their work done, and we don't want to be delayed over something that we could have done earlier.
Right,
So
right. Real quick, for those that are new to the industry or never, or want to get in, coming from a different profession, define what a circulator is.
okay, the OR circulator is kind of the almost just the everything for the room that's not sterile. So the OR circulator is usually an RN. It's typically mandated that at least there's an RN in the room, and usually it's a circulator. Registered nurse. We are perioperative nurses, and our job is to maintain sterility, but we are not scrubbed in. We are observing, we are watching, we are making sure that the people who are scrubbed in are maintaining sterile technique, that they're following everything they're supposed to do. We are, if they need something, we're the ones running to go get it, or we're opening it and making sure, because if you're scrubbed in, you're sterile and you can't do anything except within your sterile field. If you needed to go open something out of a cabinet, you couldn't do it without breaking scrub, going back, scrubbing back in. So that's why, one of the reasons we're there. Primarily, we are there to be the voice of the patient. Our patients are asleep. They are trusting us at the most vulnerable point of their lives, because they can do nothing, they can say nothing, they are not involved in their care at that point at all. And so somebody has to be there to advocate for the patient. Says, no, you can't do that. That's not on the consent. No, we're not doing that. Oh, wait, we're doing a left, not a right, to make sure, there's got to be somebody tasked with that oversight. And we all are doing it in the room for sure. But as a circulator, that is one of our primary responsibilities, is to make sure that we are advocating for the patient, because the patient cannot advocate for themselves. And then making sure they're positioned correctly, making sure that their skin is prepped for surgery correctly, and that we have all the things that we need. There's just a bunch of hats that we wear. We do the charting, all those things.
Sure.
Run our tails off a lot, but it's just kind of the nature of what we do.
Got it. Now, one thing that is talked about often, especially now, it's becoming more prevalent, because I think we're at a time where more and more medical, and I'm going to speak specifically to medical device companies, more and more medical device startups are happening, and they're looking for talent, and they're just finding any talent they can, and they're kind of throwing them into the fire as opposed to giving them really thorough training. It's one of the reasons why we have our training programs, to help them have a better experience and be more effective in the field. But I want to ask you, when you think back to your OR days, which are pretty recent, did you see, there's case coverage and then there's selling. How much selling did you see versus case coverage, and what did that look like?
So for us in the operating room at the last facility I worked at, I've worked at two different ones. So I'll talk about the last one, the most recent one first. That was, I think, more effectively done, because in our operating room, our vendors and reps did not do a lot of selling. They were there to support the case. They were there to provide expertise and assistance for the case. And then they would certainly, if a question came up and the surgeon asked about this, or, hey, I heard you talk about this, and they would talk about it. But as the orthopedic team leader, it was my job to help make decisions about new products, to help provide input for that. So the reps, while they would not stand there in the OR and distract the surgeons and try to sell to them, we would talk to them. They would come talk to us. And it kind of depended on our relationship with them. If it was a rep who never really wanted to interact with me unless they were trying to sell me something, that was a little different than if it was somebody that was prepared. They were always there. And then when I trusted them and they came to me and said, this is what we've just come out with. You want to see about it or hear about it? But there was never this pressure push. It was just more, and it was natural, I guess. And I think selling and getting people to listen to what it is you want them to listen to really comes with building those relationships. And so when I've got a good relationship with you as a rep, and I trust you, and I know that you know your stuff, it is organic. And I'm going to be like, oh, hey, let me hear more about that. And I had some really good relationships with more than just the one rep I talked about a minute ago. And they would come to me and say, hey, we've got this new product. Do y'all want to try it or whatever? And be like, tell me more about it. That sounds pretty cool. I mean, I'm all about something new. But then I've also had the vendors who I was always, it was either chasing them down or they weren't there for their cases. But then suddenly I'd see them when they wanted me
Because they're trying to
to,
push that product.
yeah. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. We're good. And so it really, for me anyway, it really was a lot of relationally based, because
Sure.
in the operating room, you do get to know your vendors and you
Sure.
work with them so much. It's
Yeah.
it's not so difficult to think that building good relationships and treating people as people, regardless of the hat they're wearing,
Right.
regardless of the
Right.
scrubs they're wearing or anything else, we're people. And we all
Yeah.
have a desire to see patient outcomes be improved and to have
Right.
our patients have great surgical experiences. And so if that means I need to try a new wound closure system, or if that means you've got a new irrigation possibly that's going to reduce infection, or if that means this particular positioning device is going to reduce pressure on some of our nerves and we're going to help our patients, yes, I want to hear about it.
Right.
And it works better on both sides when we can also have those relationships, because we are all people.
Yeah. I think you highlight something, so would you say that, a lot of people in this space, they just look to the provider being the decision maker. But, from your experience, it sounds like you were the decision maker. I mean, the surgeon's busy covering the case.
Right.
And you're telling me that you even created an avenue to invite representatives that had took the time to develop a relationship with you to sell to you. I mean, you invited them to sell to you. Talk to us a little bit about how important it is to consider the nurse as a big part of the decision-making process.
Well, you have to think about who your customer is, because yes, you want the surgeon to want to use your device. You want the surgeon to use your equipment, and they have a loud voice. They really do. I mean, I would get emails from surgeons frequently. Hey, I want to do a free trial on this. We're going to try it, whatever. And they obviously could push a lot of stuff, but it's not just the surgeon who is the customer, because in my role overseeing as an orthopedic team leader, I had a lot of input, and my opinion was valued by my director and by the director of perioperative services. Hey, they want us to buy this. Do we really need it? Are we really going to use this? Is this really any different than the one we already have? Or is it just $20,000 more of something we don't need? And so you have to remember that, because yes, the surgeon might ask for it, but when the people with the budget dollars are looking at the budget and they're asking the nurses, they're asking the techs, they're asking them, is this really valuable? Is this really something we need?
Yeah.
You want them to also understand the value. You want them to see the benefit so that they're also giving the same feedback. Because when your director, the person writing the check, whoever it may be, hears not just from the surgeon that they want this fancy leg positioner, but you hear from the scrub tech and you hear from the nurse, this is amazing. This made my life so much better. And the patient, it was easier, it was faster, it was awesome. Then they're suddenly more interested because they're hearing it from multiple angles. So never forget that it is not just the surgeon who is your customer. It is those nurses and those techs every single day.
Said beautifully. And how many nurses or how many representatives did you meet that used to be nurses, if any?
So actually more reps that I met had been scrub techs. And so I had several scrub tech reps. I don't know that I'd ever met a rep who had been a nurse, but I had met reps who had been surgical techs, and it made all the difference because they knew those instruments. And they could walk surgeons through cases. Oh, you need that. And I will tell you, this is just one more example. As an OR circulator, in my training, I was never taught to scrub in. So I was not taught to put on all the surgical garb and pass instruments and help with the case. But in my role as an orthopedic team leader, I kind of felt like that made me not a very good team leader, because I was team leader for nurses and for techs, but I couldn't help my techs. I couldn't scrub in. I couldn't give a break. I couldn't give a lunch. I'm like, this doesn't work. So I over time worked with some of my techs, had them teach me the basics, like if I'm going to give you a lunch break, or I'm going to give you a potty break or something, what can I do to help set up a case or whatever? And they did. They taught me the basics. Well, problem with that is my charge nurse then found, oh, you can scrub in, you can do this case, we need somebody. And it went from helping a little bit to scrubbing in. But the very first total hip that I had to scrub on my own, the rep saved the day. because they knew the instruments, and they didn't just know their instruments. They knew the steps, they knew the procedure, and they kept me one step ahead so that while I had no idea what I was doing other than to make sure I didn't contaminate anything, they did. And this was a rep that I had a very good relationship with. And I told him ahead of time, I'm like, I don't know how to do this, but we can't do the case if I don't scrub in. So I have to. So please help me. And he did. And he kept me a step ahead. Everything went fine. We might have dropped something on the floor a couple times, but hey, we made it through, and it was done perfectly. The case went perfectly. And I can honestly say on my part of it, it was because of the rep who helped me. And so you just can't, I don't know, this relationships, you can't put a price tag on it, especially when you're like, I need help, please.
That is fantastic. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about the sterile processing reps, and I think that's something that is not talked about a lot. No. I think that's a field that's not discussed a lot. But just like with Beyond Clean and First Case, you guys are partnering with these sterile processing companies. There's a whole world of sterile processing sales reps.
Yes.
In a nutshell, what's your experience with those types of reps? And do you know where they typically come from? Are they experienced? Are they relatively new? Have they come from a different medical sales from what you've seen? Talk to us a little bit about your experience with these types of reps.
My experience with them is more limited because I was more in the OR, but what I've seen with who I've worked with in Beyond Clean, the reps, they do a lot of times have healthcare backgrounds, or maybe they were a sterile processing technician and then they went into being a rep. And so they really speak the language, they understand it, and they know those pain points, and they know how the product they're selling provides a solution to that pain point. It always is helpful when you can speak the language. Even if maybe you go into being a sterile processing rep and you weren't a sterile processing technician, there is a world of education available for you, especially through Beyond Clean, where you can learn the language, you can learn what's going on, you can learn those issues, and it really can help make you more able to relate to your customer. But I've seen, that's what I've seen the most. Either they had other healthcare background and they went over and were, given this sterile processing product that they are now selling, or they were sterile processing techs. But I really think with the education that's out there, if they came in and it was just their very first sales position, there's still a wealth of information that they could add to their repertoire so that they could be an effective salesperson.
Got it. Well, it was wonderful getting to the bottom of everything going on in your space, Melanie, and I think you've given us a thorough education on the sterile processing world from an OR nurse's perspective, and of course, how to be the most effective medical sales rep. Beyond Clean and First Case Media. Beyond Clean is a podcast. First Case Media is the company, or are there two podcasts?
Actually, Beyond Clean is the main. It's Beyond Clean. You can find Beyond Clean is www.beyondclean.net. You can find them on their website. And then First Case Media is firstcasemedia.com. Either one of us, we're separate, but sisters, I guess you could call us. And we provide a lot of the same services, just pointed toward either sterile processing or the operating room, depending on your flavor. And so with a lot of crossover in between.
And people can listen to podcasts from both.
You can find podcasts from both. We are on every podcast platform that you're interested in. You can find us, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, whatever you like. We're there. You just search for us. You'll find us.
Fantastic. So then to wrap things up, I always like to do a fun little lightning round. So Melanie, are you ready for the lightning round?
Go for it.
All right. You have 10 seconds, less than 10 seconds to answer each question. And so basically you have to speak to the first thing that comes to mind. All right. Melanie, best book you've read in the last 6 months?
Origin of the Scalpel by Ira Rutkow.
That is the fastest answer I've ever heard a guest
say. I am currently reading it. Wherever it is sitting here next to me, I'm currently reading it.
Say the name of the book one more time.
It's called Origin of the Scalpel by Ira Rutkow. I guess that's how you say his last name. It's a history of surgery. It's very good.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. So history as in taking it way back to
all the way back to prehistoric drilling holes in skulls to let blood out and all sorts of crazy things. Yeah.
Okay. Now that's something I'm going to have to look into.
You need to read it.
I love it. Okay. And then best movie you've seen in the last 6 months or TV show.
The Rings of Power, the Lord of the Rings series on Amazon. Fantastic. I'm watching the next episode tonight with my kids. So good.
I'm a big fan of the book. And the movies were good too. Is the show, does it really match up?
So it is different because it comes before all of that. And all of the information that they used for the show came from a lot of Tolkien's other writings and a lot of Tolkien's other notes and world building that he did before he wrote Lord of the Rings. So it is different, but it all is in the same vein. There's the same feel. And I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. So call me a nerd if you want, but I will soak it all in. Oh, and I have to say, I gave you the wrong name of the book. It's Empire of the Scalpel, not Origin of the Scalpel.
Okay, Empire of the Scalpel.
Empire of the Scalpel.
So definitely looking into that one. And then best meal you've had in the last 6 months.
Okay. My birthday was a couple of weeks ago. And my brother,
happy belated birthday.
Thank you. My brother took me and my husband and his girlfriend out to dinner at a place in Huntsville, Alabama. It's in this old house that's been remodeled into a restaurant. So it had this great, just, I don't know, fun feel, but it was an Italian restaurant. And I had this, it was an upscale Italian restaurant because it's not like shrimp scampi you would get at Olive Garden. It was like this, it was this shrimp scampi pasta thing that was amazing. And just I know. And the you could get, they were also a wine bar, and so I'd actually never ordered a wine flight before, but I got to try a whole bunch of different wines, and this just amazing wine collection and delicious pasta and dessert. You roll out of there, you will not leave hungry. And it was fantastic. So it was very
so you can't say all that and not give us the name of the restaurant. You're killing me here, man. I know.
It's okay. So you're gonna have to let me look it up real quick because I don't remember. I don't live in Huntsville anymore. I'd gone up there to see my brother, and so I think it started with an M. That's not
started
terrible.
with an M. So for all you listeners out there, it did start with an M. So that's gonna help you narrow down your choices.
I know. It's in an old house in downtown.
Okay. Old house downtown starts with an M.
Maybe I can tell you if I can get Google to work super fast for me.
Don't worry about it. You know what? This is going to be fun because someone's going to figure it out and let us both know.
Yes, please tell them to. I found it. It's called Mazzaras. Mazzaras. Mazzaras, and it is divine. I highly recommend.
Sounds like it. You've sold successfully. Why did you become a medical sales rep? My goodness. All right.
Maybe I should. Maybe that's in the future for me.
Last question. Yeah. Best experience you've had in the last 6 months.
Okay. Maybe a little different than most. My oldest son just went to college, and he has joined the ROTC at Auburn University. And I can say with 100% just yes, that this has been sending him to college and watching him love and excel and do exactly what it is he wants to do and how much he loves it has been a great experience for me as his mother, just knowing that he is on the path he's supposed to be on, that he loves it. And so even getting him moved in, I thought this was going to be such a sad, emotional, terrible thing. And I'm like, woohoo, you're going to college. Yeah. Not because I want to get rid of him, but because I'm so excited about what he's doing. And it's just been fun to watch.
That is beautiful. Can't get better than that. Yeah. Well, again, Melanie, thank you for the time you gave us today. We've learned so much, and we look forward to seeing more from Beyond Clean at First Case.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Definitely.
Fantastic stuff, right? That was Melanie Perry. So I know a lot of you out there might be listening to this episode and you're thinking about what Melanie has done in her career and the things she's seen and a lot of the things that she's talked about. And you're saying to yourself, this is what I want to be a part of. I really want to get into this industry. If you're a listener at all, you already know what I'm going to say. Make sure you visit evolveyoursuccess.com. We have a program there called the Medical Sales Career Builder. And this program is designed to help you get a position just around 90 days. And if you're serious and you really want to get into this industry, and maybe you've been trying for a while and nothing's really hitting, maybe you've been sending out applications and you have heard nothing back, or you keep getting that rejection letter or that nice letter, bittersweet, that says, we regret to inform you, or thank you for applying, but we've decided to go with another candidate. Or maybe you've been interviewing and you're getting to the second round, maybe even the third round, or maybe even the last round, and you just cannot get to an offer. Well, this is why we have the Medical Sales Career Builder program. Medical sales has become such a competitive industry,
and everybody wants to get in. And so many qualified people are going for the roles. So it has changed the game in how you actually approach getting a position. And a program like this is what can do it for you. So many people have had such a positive experience going through our program and getting into the role when they were really hitting their head against the wall when they were trying to do it on their own. So if you're really trying to get in and you want to make something happen, visit evolveyoursuccess.com, select Attain Medical Sales role, have a conversation with one of us here at Evolve Your Success, and let us help you get into a medical sales position. And for you sales reps out there that are thinking about how you're going to make this next year, what you're going to do differently, how you're really going to make an impact, maybe get that promotion you've wanted, or get into the President's Club, or get into that rotation that you've been eyeing, and you're thinking to yourself, I know I can do things just a little bit differently, but I'm not sure what. Again, visit evolveyoursuccess.com, select Improve Sales Performance, take a look at our medical sales training program, and let's have a conversation and get you the results that you've been looking for. As always, we do our best to bring you guests that are changing the way medical sales looks. They're innovative. They're starting things like Melanie, podcasts, information, devices, drugs, everything that has to do with healthcare sales. They're making waves. These are the guests we try to bring you each and every week. So make sure you tune in next week for another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.